Welcome to Rewilding Love. This season is with a couple on the brink of divorce.
This is episode 19, an interview with Erika Bugbee.
You can change the chemistry of a relationship with just having something happen inside of one person. It changes the other person.
Even though it was coming from good intentions, it was having the absolute opposite effect.
We get so upset that all of a sudden things come spilling out.
Angus and I weren't able to see the health, and we were not practicing what we preach in that sense.
And there's essentially two kind of relationship skills that look to me the most fundamental relationship skill.
I haven't quite got there yet.
If you want to work something out, you can't go in with 9 things that they did.
I wasn't seeing how much my anxiety was running the show and creating an urgency about change.
I feel like we were given this crazy psychology that influences everything we do.
It's the judgment that's so toxic.
To me, I think any relationship is salvageable.
You are listening to Rewilding Love with me, Angus Ross.
And me, Rohini Ross.
Rewilding Love is a podcast about relationships.
We believe that love never disappears completely in relationships. It can always be rewilded.
Listen in as we speak with our guests about how they share the understanding behind the rewilding metaphor in their work.
And how it has helped them in their relationships.
Relax and enjoy the show.
I really enjoyed that interview with Erika.
Yeah, Erika's always so much fun.
And she never disappoints.
Never.
So for those of you who don't know her, Erika Bugbee is the founder of Erika Bugbee Global Coaching. And she specializes in working with couples, teens, young adults, and parents. And as parents, we have been on the receiving end of her support.
We have. On the receiving end of her infinite wisdom and expertise, I might say.
One of the funniest things that I remember when she was working with us was when we were having a meeting with her and she was basically setting us straight as parents, would you say? Is that one way of saying it?
Giving us a good telling off.
That's right.
A stern talking to.
That's right.
No.
And really, no, we're just joking. She does it in a beautiful way. This is not any negative commentary on Erika. But she was giving us some straight talk and really encouraging us. What?
Straight talk or street talk?
Straight talk.
Okay, straight talk.
Did I not enunciate?
I don't know, it sounded like street talk. It's like she going all ghetto on us.
Straight talk. Mm-hmm. Scaring us straight?
Scaring us straight, yes. I came away feeling scared straight.
So she was basically telling us to back off. And we hadn't realized how overly protective we were being. And part of that conversation of her helping us see that it was important for us to back off as parents, your response to that, Angus, was to say, but she's in parks, Erika. She's in the park at night.
At 11 p.m., I hasten to add.
And Erika's like, so what?
And I said, she's not in the Pacific Northwest. She's in L.A. There's a whole different flavor to that experience. But nevertheless, she was right.
And I don't think it was 11 o'clock at night. I think it was earlier. I think it was dark.
Well, yeah, it might have been 11 o'clock at night.
Maybe I didn't know about that time. But anyway, the bigger picture was that sometimes even we need support in getting perspective. And Erika was really helpful in helping us get perspective and stepping back and really seeing what allows teenagers to thrive.
Yeah, and what allows teenagers to thrive, which is what I couldn't see, is for me to have an awareness around their own innate wisdom, which I wasn't really considering. It's like, here's my job to parent them and be prescriptive, and to think that everything they're doing is probably a big mistake, and that I know better.
Well, it certainly looks that way on the surface. I can definitely agree. But with reflection and perspective, you can start to see that they do have their innate wisdom. Talk about them like they're another species. But teenagers are human too, and they do have their own innate wisdom, and it's important for them to learn to listen to it and respect it.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway from me around that was that if I could show up and show my youngest daughter that she has her own innate wisdom and has that resource to draw upon at any moment, that me showing up that way will allow her confidence to build. She'll realize, yeah, you know what, I can handle this life. I know what I'm doing here. And I think that the message that she was getting from me perhaps was like, you don't know what you're doing, and I know better. And it was much better for me to show up being this parent. It's like, you know what, you have everything you need to handle this, and help her develop her confidence along those lines.
Absolutely. And in terms of confidence, what we had to recognize is that the way confidence is built is often through mistakes, and that it wasn't our job to stop her from making mistakes.
Yeah, and I was trying my best to cocoon her away from the consequences of a mistake. But it's like, you learn by your mistakes. It's how we learn as human beings. It's contact sport.
That's right. And if we don't have confidence in her confidence, how is she supposed to have confidence in herself?
Exactly.
So it was a good journey.
It was an amazing journey, and you get to experience Erika in her full effect by listening to this podcast.
Yeah, and she shares some pearls of wisdom, some great stories, and I was really moved by what she shared about her own personal relationship.
Yeah, and I think that, this is what's, for me, starting to unfold around doing these interviews. It's just getting to hear someone else's perspective, someone else's articulation of this understanding and how they see the world through that lens. And she's no exception to the rule. She has a very unique way of looking at the world and expressing herself, and I always learn so much from her.
And she's really gifted in making it very straightforward, simple, and common sense.
Hands-on and user-friendly.
All right, well, let's go to Erika.
Sounds good.
Erika, thank you so much for joining us for our podcast. We're really excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, really excited.
Erika, I thought we would just share a little bit about our experience working with you, just for some context, and then we'd love to hear from you in terms of what you're seeing, whether it's related to the work you do with families. Our podcast focuses on couple relationships, so we'd love to hear what you're seeing new and fresh in that area. It seems like you've had some thoughts around that, so I'm excited to hear what that is. So Angus, do you want to start with our story a little bit, or where should we go?
Well, I guess when we really came into close contact with Erika, I mean, I've known you for a while, and I would meet you at your parents' trainings from time to time. But we had a rather unsettling experience with our youngest daughter.
But then you had to talk to me.
And we had to talk to you, and I think that I realized that I could talk to you, and I think it's on the back of a conversation that I'd had with you at one of those after-event parties, where I realized, like, this is the person that we need to go speak to about our youngest daughter. And there was so much for me to learn, I'll speak for myself, around that experience. But I hadn't anticipated how much I would learn from it, really, that was really quite profound. Coming to see you, Erika, for me was just sort of like getting a different lens through which to view my daughter, which ultimately had me coming away, making me realize it's like there was such a level of judgment towards her about my expectations about how she was showing up, which, as much as I thought I had a poker face around, she was feeling in no uncertain terms. So I think our relationship changed radically when I took that judgment off the table and realized it's like, yeah, that's how I'm showing up as a dad. I may be feeling like I'm following the company line and hitting all the right notes, and this is what you're supposed to do. But this was just this like feeling of judgment towards her. It's like, oh, you're depressed again. Oh, you're in a bad mood. You're in a low mood. Just that wanting her to change. I don't know. For me, I never really considered that until I had that chance to work with you. And you, I know, in your own inimitable way, sort of pointed that out to me. I don't know how you did, but you did. That's what I came away from it.
Well, it is interesting when one person in a relationship changes their perspective or gets a fresh look at things or looks at things through a different understanding, and their outlook changes. The only thing that's changed is their eyeball, but it comes out through their pores and their behavior and their emotion and their presence. And it's so interesting. You can change the chemistry of a relationship with just having one person have something happen inside of one person. It changes the other person. And that's it works for every relationship. So I think we find that more in our romantic relationships. Because I think sometimes parenting happens so fast and furious, you don't really know what your part is, and then all of a sudden it's over. But it is when you slow it way down, like you had to, you really see how much influence you can have on the relationship that had looked completely out of your control. So it's really it's very hopeful, I find.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, that was a defining moment for me, for sure, in what I was seeing in the couples work that we do, because I was realizing through me having this experience with her, seeing how I was just filled with judgment about her low moods and her depressive behavior. When I stopped doing that, and I realized what that the effect that was having on our relationship changed radically. And really what had happened, she hadn't changed, I'd changed.
Yeah.
And, we'll share this with our couples in the sense, like, and it's like what your father says, all boats rise with the tide. We only kind of really need one person to understand this. And then that change in lens complexion means the world of difference in terms of how that can now, find its footing, how it can get back on an even keel. But I think that was a turning point for me. So thank you. I should be paying you commission on that front.
No. No more commission needed. But I think you put it in a way that makes it really easy. I think everybody's done that. Outside of parenting, I think everybody knows what you're talking about. It's really hard to see why you're doing it if it looks justified, or if other people are doing it. It's really easy to kind of have your own frame of mind and feeling fly under the radar. Especially in parenting and marriage is the same way.
I think for me, when I look back at sort of what was invisible and that you helped me to become more cognizant of, was I didn't see how all of the good ideas that I thought were going to be helpful in terms of our relationship, in terms of her mental and emotional well-being, like eating dinner with us, spending time with us, things that I thought were helpful, I wasn't clear. And also she hadn't given direct feedback, so that was difficult. But I wasn't clear of how that was being experienced as pressure, and how that was getting her more busy-minded rather than less busy-minded. And so even though it was coming from good intentions, it was having the absolute opposite effect. And I remember you saying to me something along the lines of, you're fortunate that it hasn't got to the point where it's really damaged rapport, but if you keep going, it's going to.
I don't remember saying that, but I'm glad you took that well.
It might not have been those exact words, but I got the message. So to really see that, you read all the time that you have to have family dinner. It's important to not isolate if you're not feeling good, but to recognize that she was listening to her wisdom and that there was health in what she was doing. And Angus and I weren't able to see the health, and we were not practicing what we preach in that sense, in terms of recognizing that it's, the metaphor that we use now is rewilding, that this is all part of the health and the rewilding of to the natural state. Like, she was listening to her wisdom. She knew how to take care of herself. And we just thought that wasn't the way that she should be doing it.
I think all parents have that. All we have is how we were raised and our ideas from our first kid or what we've read or seen. And they're good ideas, but you have to be able to step away from them and look fresh at your kid and then see what makes sense. And sometimes people get scared. They have their go-to things and they just try and implement them. And it's almost like having a toolkit for a car when you need a toolkit to work on a house. It just don't translate. And it's hard to know that it looks like it's the kid is the problem. And marriage is that way too, hence the divorce rate. I think if people could divorce their kids, they just might. So it does really look like there's nothing you can do but stick with it. So being able to step back from it, I credit you guys, any parent that steps back and says, are we missing anything? And kind of is willing to go back to the drawing board and leave their ideas for the moment to understand the problem before they try implementing solutions.
And that was something that you really helped me with too, is that I wasn't seeing how much my anxiety was running the show and creating an urgency about change, seeing change in behavior, things shifting. So I would be rushing in to try and work things out quickly, to try and help her get on track and whatever I thought was on track in my own mind.
Yeah, that's a theme. I'm sure you guys see this all the time that I see in couples that has so much similarity to parenting, because oftentimes couples are looking at, well, do I want to stay with this person? And if it's not going to get better, then I'm out of here. And so they're trying to there's an urgency because they don't want to waste their time with this person. Or there's an urgency because they don't want to go through something that's been sour for a really long time, a day longer than they want to get going if they're going to get going. Or so that sort of the urgency, I think you hit it right. What came to mind when you asked me if I wanted to do this is we were just hanging out with friends a few weeks ago. I had to ask my friend if I could use this example because they've been married. We haven't worked with this couple. They're just friends of ours. But they've been married 3 or 4 years, and she's 42, I think. And she's had sort of a string of bad relationships. And this has been her longest relationship, and she's never been married. And she said, it was so funny. She made this offhanded comment. She said, God, I just found myself getting so irritated with him. And it was happening all the time, like a lot. Like I was getting really mad. And she's like, and I don't get mad. She said, and then I realized, wait, I'm playing a long game here. This is a long game. And I thought that was so cool. I didn't say anything at the time. I was like, I'm using that in a webinar. Because I thought like that shift, I'm kind of a psychology nerd. So I thought like, that is really cool. Because there was a shift that happened in her mind that I know didn't happen in her past relationships, where it's something I want to highlight because people get very kind of frustrated and outraged by their partner's habits. And it can kind of turn into bitterness and defeat about you and about them, about your future really fast. And it's so threatening when it's your marriage or your relationship, because it is something that's so big that matters so much to you. And you just have all your eggs are in one basket, and it has so much influence on your well-being, and yet it's out of your control. It's very unsettling, and it doesn't matter if you've been married for 20 years or if you're just starting a relationship. It's just as precious, and people really want to feel connected, and they want to feel like they have someone. We want to feel like we have somebody in our corner. We want a person. More than anything else, I think for me, that's what why relationships matter so much, is you want to have someone in it with you. And there's nothing worse than having someone right next to you and being alone. Mm. And that, so the shift that I thought was so interesting in my friend, I'll call her Mary, is that in a way, what she realized is, and I don't know if people see this, and you guys did this with your kids, is that there's a way in which, you're kind of issued your humanity when you're born, like given this, like here's a psychology that you have to take with you in life. It's kind of stuck with you. And, it's really, in a way, it's on us to protect the world from our devices. We sort of have to be thoughtful about how we go about our relationships. We're sort of in a role. I know when you get up in the morning and you go into your kitchen, it feels like you're at home. You can be yourself and let it all hang out, but you can't. And we don't. In a way, we're in a role. We have sort of, we're in a role the way that you're in a role when you have a roommate, when you're at work. You have to sort of keep it together to some degree. You can't just say what comes to mind. And is sort of, that's our contribution to the greater good, is to have our sort of our spiritual life and our well-being and their well-being. We have to kind of look after those a little bit. And we do it. I mean, one of the places I think people do this the most, it's the loudest and the hardest to do, is family gatherings. We've had a conversation about that. You really feel, oh, I need to step it up. If you start eye rolling at the table, I need to go in another room. So there is something that we do in the rest of our lives that I think sometimes we fall asleep, either in parenting or in our romantic relationships, where we get so urgent that we lose ourselves. We lose track. We get so upset that all of a sudden things come spilling out. And there's something, in a way, what I saw this last few weeks as I was preparing for this is that in my mind, there's essentially two kind of relationship skills that look to me the most fundamental relationship skills. And it's not communication. It's not looking after the other person or looking after you. It's essentially, we're required to overlook things, and we're required to show restraint. There's sort of those two things, and to some degree, in your friendships, there's things that the ones that last and that survive both your crazies, is that you're able to overlook things in them. And similarly, you're also able to restrain yourself to some degree from having your crazy come out and get all over them. You're not in a good mood and they keep talking about their breakup and you don't really want to hear it. You really just want to watch Survivor. You sort of get a hold of yourself. And in a way, that's how we show our love for people. And in a way, this is what I talk to parents about a lot, is if you have a kid you're sort of estranged or they're struggling, I talk to parents a lot about how you show your love is not by trying to get them to go to dinner and leaning into them as you lean back. And they're asking for space with their hostility and their body language and their nastiness. And they stabilize much better when we give them space, oftentimes. That the way that parents oftentimes need to show their love and their support for their kid is by listening to them and hearing, you want me to leave you alone, and leaning back and essentially showing restraint. So I remember my son came home from his first day at a new job, and he came home and he went right upstairs. And normally he'll come home and talk and tell us, generally. And it took every ounce of my self-control not to follow him up there and be like, how'd it go? Did it go well? What happened? And but there's something that we do in our relationships. It's essentially allows for the human condition and allows for their humanity when it's not doing well, and allows for our humanity when we're not doing well, either through restraint or overlooking. That's what it looks like to essentially where all of our grace and composure comes from in the relationships where we're somehow magically insulated from their bad habits and how they get when they're not doing well. That also protects the relationship from us when in our bad habits, when we're not doing well. is there's some way in which we're accounting for and sort of savvy to, oh, I need to keep my mouth shut. That's not going to come out well. I think I'm going to be quiet on this one and just let them talk. So we that sort of the overlooking and the restraint, it doesn't look like it, but they're very profound, high-minded relationship skills that are sort of essential to every good relationship that we do really well in our jobs and with roommates and with friends. And we get the only thing that happens from my vantage point to couples and that happens in families when things start to go sideways, that disappears. And I just have seen it now when I look at relationships since I've been looking out this way the last couple of weeks. Everything seems to trace back. That plays a part. Not that there's not other things going on, but to me, that's the most fundamental part of it. That's right up. That's like the bones of a good relationship. Does it make sense?
Makes complete sense.
I think about it'll be about being state of mind. Let's say it's all about state of mind. So if I'm in a low mood, probably don't want to act out in terms of what I'm compelled to say here or how I'm feeling at the moment and what she's doing. I'll use Rohini as a case in point. If I'm in a low mood, I'm in a low state of mind. If I can learn to not trust the thinking in that state of mind, then I'm probably not going to certainly act out from that state of mind. But it's like, yeah, restraint is that's what's key in that moment, is learning restraint. I haven't quite got there yet, but it has to be key. And it's just another way of talking about what we do. We're in that state of mind. How do we deal with ourselves in that state of mind? Do I want to hop on that train of thought and then react from that train of thought? No, I really don't, because I really shouldn't trust that train of thought. It'd be great if I could learn to restrain myself from trusting that train of thought, because that's always where I get into trouble. And then I can create a habit out of that trouble too.
I feel like when we were given this crazy psychology that influences everything we do at birth, the one advantage we did get is it is somewhat predictable. If you step back and you look at the kinds of trouble you get yourself into, if you look at 5 relationships that aren't going well,
yeah,
they're generally not going well in the same way.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
even though they're 5 different people, so
Yeah.
you can kind of tell. And that's what I thought. I worked with this couple last year, and she would want to talk to her husband at the end of her day, and he would kind of tune out. He wasn't really available. And for her, she took it really personally, and she was sort of thinking about getting out. They've been married 22 years, I think. And she said, well, I'd be talking and I'd see him, I'd say, so this, my coworker keeps emailing me and trying to rope me into this thing and CCing me, and she's trying to get me, she's basically trying to being passive aggressive and trying to get me to, get involved in this and trying to sort of blame me. And she's real frustrated, and she looks over and he's scrolling his phone. And he's like, no, I'm listening. And she's just getting really infuriated. And then at the end of it, he says, well, if you just stop responding to her emails, she'll stop emailing you. Problem solved. And she just could have killed him. And she said he was so pleased with himself. He was so just smug and arrogant. Like, oh, you don't really even have to listen to my problems and you can solve them. And they were on the brink of divorce by the time they reached out. And it's so interesting because when she got out of that, the next morning we were talking, and she said, when he gets overwhelmed, which happens really easily, he just checks out. And I love that about him, because I will keep going and I'll exhaust myself and I'll take on things, and he won't. He's like, he'll just pick up my phone and just drop it. He loves doing that. He'll just take it and he'll do it in the sweetest way. And I get it instantly. And I realize I need this guy in my life. I need some of that, because I didn't grow up like that. I don't know anybody like that. It's his best feature. And what happens when we can step back away from, their personality when they're kind of an ogre, is that all the things that drive us crazy are the upside of that person. And in our softer moments, we would agree with that. We would say, no, I need that. I love that he's not like that. The part of him that doesn't get involved in people's drama and doesn't get outraged by wrongness like I do. I love that. And that's, I think, what we all want is it sort of a protection from the sharp, pointy parts of our relationship, and the parts that are, what we are looking for is connection. The irony is that, when people aren't doing well, we feel alone and disconnected, when in fact, they're doing exactly what we do. That happens to all of us. We all turn into giant a-holes when we're not doing well. She would say it herself. In case she hears this, she would say, I get all self-involved and I think everybody needs to stop and listen to me, even though they've had long days themselves. And she says, I turn into a martyr and I start looking at him and thinking, this is what's wrong with our country. And I did it again. I married, a terrible person again. She's like, as soon as I get tired, I hop onto this whole story and I bash my husband at my marriage. And she says, as soon as she switches out of that, she feels like the lucky one. She feels like she leveled up. And which is exactly how I feel. My marriage, I feel like, I hope he doesn't figure out like that I'm just, and have net fewer points than him. Because in my softer moments, I feel like he's so much better at so many of the things I'm bad at, because my habits are so familiar to me that I think, ironically, his habits, I'm good at all the things he's bad at. So if you can step away from the drama and the particulars and get out of the weeds, every time they go down, they're showing that their humanity works exactly like yours, and that their personality, the worst side of them, comes out. Somebody horrible and unrecognizable when they're not doing well. And that happens to the three of us. And then when fortunately, the way the system works is that when that mood state passes, when thought recovers, it changes, because it's this living, breathing thing, your psychology. It clears itself up, and then all of a sudden your personality gets restored. And you're the person that you want people to see, all the sides of you that are your strengths. They just come back. You don't even have to do anything. You lose them. And then all of a sudden it's like your glasses. They're like, oh, they're right here. So, and that's whoever you're married to, whoever you're in a relationship with, you're in it. You're both being accosted by the same system, and you're both forgetting and having it turn on you and making you feel alone, when it's not possible for us to be alone, given that we're all part of the same system. So it's what I find reassuring is that the truth that we're in this by ourselves is really not true. It doesn't matter if you're in a relationship, a romantic relationship or not. It's true because there's other people in the world. They're all necessarily turning into horrible versions of themselves and then becoming nice, decent people again. It's this universal system.
I think that's so reassuring to see the universal nature of that, because so often there's the expectation that our partner's never going to show us the horrible version of themselves. And especially at the beginning of relationships, that's often either ignored, overlooked. Like, it's really the two things about restraint and overlooking are so easy to do, usually at the beginning of relationships. And that's why it works so well.
Yeah.
And then as we get more comfortable and our own conditioning kicks in, it gets harder to do them. Like, when I was thinking about what you're saying about the overlooking, I was realizing, like, oh yeah, it's so much harder for me to overlook things with Angus than it is with anybody else in the world, pretty much. And I'll zone in on that one thing that I probably wouldn't even mention to someone else, and happen to mention that to him, which is the last thing he needs to hear. But I love how you talked about restraint and overlooking and simplified, because I hadn't looked at it in that way. And to be able to have sort of those guide rails in a sense, and realize, like, yes, I can do this pretty much in every other relationship in my life fairly easily. What is it about here where I lose my mind, or it makes it look a lot more difficult? And as you're saying, when those low moods hit, it's like those guide rails come off, and the restraint goes out the window, and the overlooking goes out the window, and it's like a field day to just share everything, or to
the open season on Angus. Well, it is. I mean, that's the part that I think is so nice, is that not only are your habits start to become familiar if you're looking for them, but also there's all these signs that this amazing system of thought will show you that when you're not doing well, your perception is colored in such a way where it looks like you're the victim and they're the perpetrator, or you're the good person and they're the bad person, they're in the wrong and you're in the right. There's certain perceptions that show up. Life gets organized in a certain very skewed, absolute black and white way. And if that doesn't clue you in, that it looks like there's good people and bad people and you're in the good pile, your feelings are there. That if you can't see it in the content, that the content's organized suspiciously slanted in your favor or slanted against you, then your feelings will tell you that because you to the extent that you've forgotten to show restraint and overlook, you'll have a very bad taste in your mouth. You'll feel hostile and defensive and nasty and fault-findy. So the way that you feel before you even open your mouth will be toxic. So that you'll get a chance to see it. You know,
I can taste the gasoline in my mouth.
I was just going to say, it's kind of
a fire-breathing dragon is about to appear.
Right. It's so obvious. It's almost like like something, like you're eating something bad. But if you don't pay attention to it, it's surprisingly easy to miss. So, you know, I was listening to this song the other day. I love Eric Clapton, and he's got this great MTV Unplugged album, if anybody out there wants a whole album to listen to. And he's got my favorite song on there is the one that says, before you accuse me, take a look at yourself. And that's, as soon as we get finger pointy and blamey and start building a case, as soon as you open up your file where you're building a case and adding infractions to their record, that's how you know. That's thought's way. That's the intelligence behind life telling you, oh, you got that file in your hand? Let's take a look at you and your file. It's foolproof, and it works every time. And I think that's the part that somehow we feel a little bit of accountability in our relationships. We look after them a little bit more. And we just get, I don't know if it's sloppy or lazy, or we just somehow it gets to where we can kind of lose the plot, and all of a sudden it starts getting away from us, and it can look like that's not in our control. And what I think is so nice, it doesn't matter how far gone a relationship is. If you have people that want to make it work and have no idea how, it's the wanting to make it work part that matters. It's frankly the only thing that matters. So you can come back from any loss. It's not like there's just a certain number of innings like baseball. You can come back from anything, and it It just, you do have to be willing to see, I need to look within my jurisdiction. And that's always, there's a way in which as soon as people get out of the blame and let their mind settle down, the stuff that they've built up, their bad feeling is so clear that it's hard to see past that, just like for you. Once you realize I'm just full of judgment, it's the only place you're not looking, but it's right there. As soon as you look, there's no way you can say, well, I think I'm doing great. Because if you're in a bad relationship, I promise you, you've got a horrible taste in your mouth. And so our jobs at that point are really easy. So we just play that Clapton song.
Yeah. When, one of the programs that I ended up doing, probably because I felt like I'm constantly playing catch up with my wife. I felt like at this point, maybe I'll just spend the rest of my life playing catch up with my wife. But I remember being introduced to this concept, and this is a concept that everybody seemed to struggle with universally, this idea of projection, that if I don't like, there's something about this person that I don't like, why I don't like there's something about that person is because it's something about myself. And everybody really struggled with that. But that kind of is the Eric Clapton line, isn't it?
Right.
It's just like, yeah, go look at myself first and figure out what's going on there before I get into this sort of need to judge someone else. And it's the judgment that's so toxic. That's the gasoline in our mouth. It's that judgment. And I love that visual, that sensory experience of feeling like, yeah, it is toxic. It tastes toxic. Yeah, I'm compelled to sort of like make them the fall guy. It's their fault.
Right. Yeah, to blame them for the taste in your mouth.
Exactly. But it's as ridiculous as that, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. But it is, it's neat though. I find it so, I think this part of our humanity is like, it's like this amazing gift, is that you can have so much hostility and so much buildup and so much kind of bad history with someone. And yet, as soon as you have a moment where you feel like, wait, I don't want to lose this. And whatever I have to do, I want to get it back. I know I have a part. As soon as people find their sort of their softness and their openness and are willing to figure or don't care if it's their fault or the other person's fault, they just want it back. It just takes a little of that, kind of like when you're mad at someone and you're all ready to just let them have it. And then they come to you and you think they're going to want to get back into it, but they come and they're all apologetic and soft. And, it's like impossible to resist. And it just, as soon as people come in a feeling of apology, if you're ready for it and if they're genuine, those few times in life where that happens, it can melt anything. And that's the part that I feel like that's where all the potential comes from, is that as soon as we soften up in our own feeling, all of a sudden it changes who you're dealing with, so that your personality can bring out the worst in them. Just like when you're driving, you need to know those people. And if you're kind of hostile, all of a sudden everybody gets hostile. And in the same sense, as soon as you soften up, it doesn't matter if you're dealing with hostility, it softens them up. And that's just an amazing chemical reaction that we don't have to do anything with, but just stand in a different feeling and then just be present in the relationship with the other person. And it does the thing. It can move mountains, and it can sort of dissolve fights and misunderstandings and animosity that are decades old. That's what I think that's constantly amazes me, at how fast you can clean something up when people sort of have a change of heart and look in the direction that we're pointing.
Getting back to our daughter, I think that for me, where I soften, where I change and realize that I'm showing up in judgment, what I wasn't realizing is that she's smelling the gasoline. this is almost like invisible fuel. There's no way she gets a sense of my judgment, but she was feeling that in no uncertain terms.
Yeah.
And when I let go of that, I feel like things radically changed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of people, like parents, want to see their kid show some respect or show some appreciation or get their grades up. They want to see some change in their kid before they change. I'll start respecting and appreciating them if they start respecting and appreciating me. I'll let up if they show that they're responsible. And it unfortunately does not work that way. In the same way that I'm sure you guys see this all the time. For 20 years, I see couples that are like, well, I guess we're getting a divorce because I'm not changing. And I always have to call them out. Like, are you sure you want to go that route? Because if you're waiting for them, you might want to just file now. Because I don't know if you want to give me your money. But if you're willing to start wherever it needs to start, if you're willing to sort of take them off the table and look inside you, I promise you'll see somewhere you can go, which is a relief to people, because I don't want to feel like the fate of my relationship is in their hands, especially if they look like a giant a-hole to me. I want to feel I think people forget when things get really bad and the other person gets in a sort of an adversarial state, how much influence we have if we can find a different feeling inside ourselves. It doesn't look like that would be the case, because that's not what you see in the mechanics of things. But people really, when people are willing to sort of take stock in a way, say, for the moment, never mind this other person, which is hard to do because it looks like you're letting them off the hook momentarily. And in a sense, you are. You're kind of forgetting about their horrible behavior, which might be much worse than yours. We can judge that. But it can't, it still has to start with you. And it is amazing what people can see when they say, never mind what they're doing. I am being judgmental. I have lost my faith in my kid. I have written off this person that I'm in a long-term relationship with. This woman, Mary, that's what she would do. She said, I'd write him off. In a way, I would be starting an exit strategy. And we just got married. That's not good. So it doesn't matter, even if he deserves it. I feel like this is a little soon to give up. And I want to at least practice hanging in there so that if I do leave him and get with someone else, I'm better at sticking with it. I'm getting something out of this. And it's as soon as she felt like I'm going to look inside myself, and her mind quieted down, her way of showing up without all the charge, all of a sudden he responded in a way where she was kind of hoping that he would be, dismissive, and he wasn't. She was sort of in a way hoping to say, see, he's that way. And she said, I didn't want to tell you this, but, I went home and I kind of, made a joke about how maybe I had blown things out of proportion because he'd been dismissive. She just went and slept on the couch that night. And she said it was so sweet because I made this comment and I meant it. I did maybe blow things out of proportion. And he said, well, that's fine. I didn't notice because I was busy hanging out with my fake Facebook family. He was kind of joking about how he sort of checked out, and then he was cute. He said, it's a good thing we found each other, or we would have, gone to the grave single. He kind of realized, we're both sort of badly behaved. And she said it was so reassuring because I just realized neither of us are very good at this. And we know how to do it. We just have to commit to seeing our part. She said it just made relationships look so simple.
That's great. And you're really pointing out the resiliency that's naturally there if people are willing to, if they want to make a relationship work, like if that's their intention, that capacity that we have to drop into that space of non-judgment and a good feeling and a willingness to see something fresh and to see our partner through the eyes of their innocence, doing the best that they can. Like it completely resets things. And we can do that as many times as we want to do that. Even if we have to do it multiple times a day, it's possible to do that. And whenever I dig my heels in and get caught up in my ego and get righteous and justified, I'm suffering the whole time I'm doing that. It never feels good. It never really does anything for me. And yet there's those times where I forget and I get stuck in that. But every time that I remember, oh, I can get more quiet. I can let this go. I don't need to keep ruminating on it. When I'm able to do that, the feeling that comes in is so much nicer. The feeling of an open heart, that soft feeling that you're talking about, it just feels so much better. And then I realized, like, what was I doing? Wasting my time dwelling on that or ruminating on that.
Yeah, you put a lot of miles on the engine.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I do think you hit on something that it's something that you get better at, that you have to be willing to not know what you're going to do about something in order to set it down and walk away and get a fresh look. And sometimes that feels passive to people, or like they're, giving the other person permission to treat them badly, or whatever they just did is okay. We're not saying that at all. Some of my best parenting moves for me with my teenagers has been walking away. Because I know, and the bigger the infraction, the longer sometimes I'll take before I come back. So it might be a couple of days if it's really bad. And for those few days, it looks like they got away with it. But I know when it's something where I really have a charge and I really react and I'm thinking terrible things, or all I feel is outrage, or I feel like they're bad people, I know I'm really, I don't know. I'm in no state to parent. I've lost my leadership skills. And I think in a way, I think we need to be able to take some ownership over the issues themselves and what they're doing. As soon as people can commit to that, the way that we do in our relationships where we do well, your ideas are better, your interventions are better. And you can make the distinction between what's actually a big a deal and what's not. Because, when you're upset, everything's a big deal. When you're a parent, everything's a big deal. And when you're in a relationship and you're crabby, everything's a big deal. They don't have to even have done anything. It's amazing. We're really good at making everything look like a big deal. Like, we're amazing. So it does, I think we do have to be willing to say, I have no idea if I'm onto something. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I don't know what's a problem. I don't know if they're the problem. If I'm the problem, if I should leave them. To me, that's the honesty that I think we owe ourselves as human beings, is that if we're crazy half the time, which I think, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like on our bad weeks, we're really bad. It's like 80%. So I feel like on average, I think half our output and half our perception of life is, garbage, or at least highly contaminated and suspect. That I think, and at least impaired to some degree. That if you figure, well, maybe I have bad information, maybe my data is bad, let me take a fresh read when I've calmed down. That's the part that I think we owe ourselves. If you don't do that, you're hurting. You're using your own thinking to bash your relationship. And what you're doing is you're essentially withholding something from yourself that could be really good. And I think that's the part, I think, in those moments where you feel close to people and you feel like you're in it together with somebody, you can be up against anything. It's when you feel like someone's in your corner, somehow we're okay with whatever horribleness is happening, whether it's like an illness or something wrong with a kid, or worried about money. Somehow when you're in it with somebody else, we can be calm about anything. And I think to scare that off in your relationships because you've kind of been under the spell of your own negativity, it's unfortunate, but it's also something you can get the hang of because it's happening in all of us. It's going to happen a bunch of times this week. If you're looking for it, you get good at it. The way you get good at handling a really difficult in-law that you now get along with. Whatever you do there, you got to just sprinkle some maybe in your relationship, and then maybe they won't need us.
That's right.
Maybe we'll be out of a job.
That would be a great world to live in.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's something, what we're pointing to, we honestly do really gracefully in so many areas of our lives. And for some reason it gets a little bit harder to see. The lines get a little bit blurred when you've been around the same person long enough. Their file of how bad they are starts to look pretty bad, and your file is just sitting over there unused with nothing in it. It's funny. I think we all get under that spell.
Yeah, the file folder gets thicker and thicker over the years.
Yeah. So I think, the part that is always is reassuring to me is that as soon as we can let go of all the data that we have in the moment, in our charged moments, in our moments where we've sort of gotten polarized and lost, and whatever it is, whatever your flavor is that you get in, that you're in it alone, or that you're in another bad relationship and you start losing faith in yourself and in them, those reminders, what's on the other side of that, if you can kind of step away from the storyline and let things air out a little bit, like wine, let it just breathe a little bit. What's on the other side of that is all the fondness and the part of their humanity that drew you to them, or the part of their humanity that you admire and either look up to or are grateful for, or all of that. The best parts, the best moments in our relationships really live as a potential forever with that person, because they didn't change. Just maybe a different side of them came out, and maybe your dynamic only brings out that side, but it's still in there. And that, to me, I think any relationship is salvageable. Even if the other person doesn't want to be in a relationship with us, our ability to have a change of heart and see they just get caught up. That's how they get. And to not take it personally, and to see, I get that way, maybe less extreme, maybe less hostile, but I recognize that. You can feel close to somebody, even if they don't feel close to you. And that's oftentimes, frankly, what's allowed me to reset in my own relationship over the years. Is I'm the one that makes the first move within myself of like, I'm no picnic. So, and to remember, I'm not sure who's the lucky one here, to kind of feel a little bit like maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. That's just kind of the beginning of it for me.
It's always fun to hear how you articulate it, and the great metaphors that you use and the stories that you share always helps me to see something new as well. So Angus and I are thanking you for this time.
Yeah. Well, it's 49 years of messing up relationships in my own life and having to get them back on track. So I'm in the same club you guys are in, and everybody else.
That's right. Angus is going to be saying, "Are you going to overlook?" And I'll say, "Are you going to show some restraint?"
Yeah.
Are you under the spell of negativity?
Yes. Stay in your own lane now. So there's no fights. You can't use my material in a fight.
Okay. You have a patent on it, right?
Yeah, I don't want to get any nasty emails in the middle of the night.
No, we would only say it in the best way. In the best way. Sometimes just that is enough to get us back on track.
Yeah.
It can be the more post-mortem vernacular, I guess.
But it's going to be fun, because I think you really simplified it with those 2 points.
Yeah.
Like, just as I'm sitting here reflecting on it, I'm like, yeah, if I'd shown restraint there, it would be a whole different situation. Or if I'd overlooked that, it would have been a whole different situation. And those skills are there, as you're saying. We exercise that all the time in relationships that we're less close to the person. It's so much easier to do there because the file folder is very thin, if there is one at all. But when we get into that thick file folder of memory in terms of our very intimate personal relationships, it just gets so much harder to remember that. But those are the people we want to.
Yeah, I'll just make this last point, is that I think we do see, it's really easy to see when other people are missing restraint and overlooking in their relationships, or in a moment, in a meeting where someone goes off and like, that's probably not the time to do this. It's really easy to see, like, that's really where people step in it, is they just get in the heat of the moment and then they blurt, or they take issue and then they never recover from that moment and they didn't hear anything. And especially if you have something that needs to get addressed in a relationship, you can't really afford to be caught up on whatever technicality you're caught up in. You sort of need to be able to let a lot of stuff go if you want to work something out. You can't go in with 9 things that they did. You have to be, well, you can't go in mad at them. You have to go in and just focus on one thing. And I think it's really easy to see when other people miss the mark. It's just maybe not so easy in us, but we clearly have the skills because we know exactly what it looks like when people are doing it, and it's, be easy to articulate.
It's about turning the mirror on ourselves, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I want to get one of those. I get a Silence of the Lamb outfit that I can put on when I so that you can know I'm restraining myself here. I'm in a low mood.
Is it going to take the mask and everything?
Yeah, no. I want
Is that how bad things
the full
get
metal work. Yeah.
At your guys' house.
I know it's a bad week.
Well, I think about The Simpsons. I don't know if you guys watch The Simpsons, and they have, you ever see that episode? There's an episode where they go to a family therapy and they give them all zappers. No, and they're wearing those kind of shock collars. And when they do something you don't like, you zap them.
I love that.
Oh, I've threatened getting a set of those at my house before.
We'll be flinching.
Shock collar.
Yeah.
Awesome. There would be some weeks where we'd probably be electrocuted.
Oh, absolutely. You'd have to go live out of range for the weekend.
Oh, Erika, thank you. It's been really wonderful. So should we start? Angus, you ready?
Yes. Yeah.
So this is just a sneak peek into your life. So just think of your relationship. So what's one of the fondest memories in your relationship?
One of the fondest memories, I think one of the fondest memories for me, I think, was the first weekend that my husband and I we had this long distance relationship for, 8 months. We were 2 states away from each other. And so we would fly and meet once a month to see each other. And we took this weekend away, and went to the Oregon coast, and it was really cool because I could see his I caught little glimpses because we spent 2 days together, and normally we didn't see him that much. I saw his kind of in-between moments where he would get kind of awkward or, kind of a little bit clumsy. I would just catch these little glimpses of his humanity. And we were with another couple, my best friend and her husband. And it was so relaxed. And he just let his guard down. It was really neat because I would think, in a new relationship, you don't want to be awkward. You don't want to come across as like your best version of you all put together. And it was really endearing because I thought, like, I feel like I can completely be myself. And I think I was looking for it. I think I was looking for, I was really interested in that there's something here. And I was looking for the in-between moments. I was looking for just somebody that I could be comfortable with and build a life with. And I think, in the past, that might have made me feel insecure myself, having somebody else get insecure, not know what to say and have an awkward moment. And for me, it was sort of it was one of my fondest moments, I think, for me, because it just felt like I was at home on my couch. And it felt very light, and it just felt like there was nothing at stake and there was no pressure. It was really, and I just felt him, his little person. It was a very sweet moment.
So I'll do the next question. What is one of the funniest memories in your relationship?
I think one of the funniest moments for me is, I hate to have hopefully my husband doesn't hear this because I don't want him to do more of this, but he messes with me a lot. And, he kind of tricks me. He had 3 older siblings that messed with him. So he didn't have a younger sibling. So I'm the younger sibling. And we went to a concert across the state, and we bring our camping stuff, and at the gorge on the other side of Washington State. And we bring our camping stuff. We camp out for a couple of nights, and then we go to this, they play right there at that venue, and it's a beautiful outdoor venue. And so you make camp, you make dinner, and we meet a bunch of people there, and we all go together to the show. And it's like maybe a mile walk. So we set off, and we're just in the best mood. I love live music. So I'm just on cloud 9. And so my husband says, do you have the tickets? I'm like, no, you have the tickets. And he does this all the time. Oh, do you have the keys? And then he gives me this like, no, I don't have the keys. So by this time, we've been married a long time. So I'm certain he has the tickets and he's messing with me. So I don't believe him. So we walk like a half a mile. He's like, I really don't have the tickets. And I keep telling him, look, this is kind of a long time to drag this out. So finally we get to the gate to give our tickets, and we've been walking for 45 minutes. And we're with this giant group, all of our friends, and he can't produce the tickets because he doesn't have the tickets. And we had to buy tickets because we had left the tickets, we figured out, at home on my refrigerator. I had left them, actually.
Oh.
And it was so funny because at the time, in that moment, it wasn't funny because we didn't know if they were going to have tickets. Fortunately, they did, but we had tickets right up at the front, and we had to sit up in the nosebleeds because those were the only tickets they had. We spent all this money on tickets right up in the front. And what was so funny is that there's something funny about the fact that I didn't believe him. And he essentially set me up for like 10 years to, like, kind of, in a way, I had it in my head that he'd been sort of planning this because there was so much buildup, and it was such a big deal that the whole thing was one of the funniest. It was one of the hardest. I laughed harder during that moment. It was halfway through the concert. I thought it was so funny that here we are sitting in the nosebleeds, and I didn't believe him, and it took him 45 minutes to convince me. That was, I think I laughed harder in that moment than I ever have. And I think it's maybe that's part of what it finally took that long to get me to have a sense of humor about him tormenting me. I finally saw why he does it because it was so hilarious.
I hope your husband doesn't listen, and I hope Angus doesn't take out a leaf out of his book.
Hey, my husband doesn't need any extra fuel. But I think partly because I was so gullible that I was so pleased with myself that I looked like such an idiot to me that it was just it was hilarious.
Yeah, I personally hate those kind of pranks. I think don't get any ideas, Rohini.
No, I can't stand them. That's why I think it's so funny, is I thought I was being so clever.
Yeah, I remember I went on a work trip, and it was to New York, and the 2 people I were traveling with, I went to the bathroom, I came back, and they took my passport out of my bag and didn't tell me, and watched me panic and sweat until the very last minute, and then they produced it. I literally took everything out of my luggage trying to find it.
Well, I had to do a little tutorial for my husband. I said, look, if we're going to stay married, here's the deal. You can play jokes on me because you're not going to stop, but if they make me upset, the more upset they make me, the longer you're going to be in the doghouse and not understand why I can't take a joke. So be warned. So I had to
Right,
teach him
right.
to play jokes on me where it doesn't actually upset me.
Good deal.
Yeah, I had to teach him, but I had to get over my outrage to do that. So
See?
see,
Great lesson.
It is.
that's why I could do a good talk today. I had to figure that one out.
All right. The next one is, what's one of the most difficult times in your relationship and how did you get through it?
I think the hardest moment for me, and I don't know if he would say the same thing, is when our kids were both in diapers, and we had two kids, and we were really struggling with one of them in particular, and just the phase he was in, and we were both just exhausted and just spread thin, and when you have that second kid, your naps disappear. Whatever downtime you had when they're playing with Legos, the other ones, that something's happening. So you basically just sprint everywhere for, years. And so we were just exhausted. And I think what's interesting is we had this sort of collision between him not taking things so seriously and me feeling like, we have to take things seriously. And it looked like to him like I was uptight, and it looked to me like he didn't care. So now for me, where I went is, well, I'm in this by myself. I got to do everything myself. And it sort of compromised my view of him, because he looked all of a sudden like he's out. I have no, what I thought was an asset is he doesn't bring anything to the table. He went from being like a full partner to like a part-time, like a part-time employee that just clocks in. Not even that. I can't even rely on him to like open up the store, or like man the cashier. I sort of had this moment where I thought, not only am I doing this alone, but he's coming in with his stupid interventions that are just making things, he's creating bad habits, and he sticks them in front of the TV, and I'm willing to work hard. Well, now they want to watch TV more. And even when I would get breaks away, I would be like, well, so he's just going to cruise and watch TV? No, you need to work when you're, you can't just take shortcuts. But at some point I realized I don't know if my philosophy is right. Maybe his philosophy is right. And it took me a long time to consider that there was anything right with his philosophy, and that he brought anything to the table. But I did have a moment where I thought, well, do I want two of me? I definitely don't want that. I had thought that I did. I thought if he could just be more like me, the way he sees things and does things. And then I caught a glimpse of what our poor children go through. But prior to that moment, there was a long period of time where I had just made up in my head that I had an antagonist living in the house. And I was, on top of doing everything myself, I'm having to dodge bullets, and I'm having to, do all these like maneuvers to shelter the kids from his horrible effect. That's what it felt like. It felt kind of like when my Labrador Retriever is downstairs by himself, and there's garbage cans everywhere. Like, it just felt like I'm going to go down and there's going to be mayhem. I felt like I had to do two things at once. And that part of it, I think the hardest part was feeling like kind of betrayed by life. I thought I had this partner and someone that was going to help me. And instead you installed this person that's like sabotaging me, like whoever's out there that creates viruses. Like, really, we're just trying to work here, and you got somebody who's trying to sabotage. That's what it felt like. And it felt really, I wasn't even mad at him. I was sort of mad at, life and God, and just that was, I think, my, our probably his too, kind of our darkest, by far my hardest moment.
I can definitely relate to that. I think we had our meltdown around the same time.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people that have kids that have, they're more challenging, the divorce rate is higher. And I think is you really have to want to find your way back and be in it together, warts and all, rather than in it alone. And I think a lot of the couples that make it back in say that. They say, you know what, I'd rather have, a working partner in this, even if they suck at a whole bunch of things, than be in it alone and have, the right skills. It's hard to see that from where I was. It's really hard to see that when you're, super dark. Mm-hmm. You've gone over to the dark side.
So, question number 4, how do you divide domestic labor in your relationship?
So my husband does the laundry. He does most of the cooking, especially since the pandemic. Now that I get both teenagers in the house and I work, I realized I have to manage them and figure those things out. So I do the sort of parenting, heavy lifting, and then and the sort of mechanics and the, laying out the rules and the enforcement. But though he's a second on the team because he'll weigh in, I'll kind of consult with him. He'll weigh in and he'll be maybe more, I'm fairly strict around specific things and then very hands off around a lot. And he'll come in and say, I don't like this. This doesn't work. So he's sort of we team up on a lot of the parenting, but then the mechanics. So as I'm busier with the kids, he'll do the cooking. The cleaning is pretty even because he does all the things I hate, and then I gladly do all the things that he hates.
It's very good teamwork.
That's good teamwork.
He does laundry. I by accident, when I was scooping up laundry off of the laundry room floor, a piece of steel wool was on the floor, and that got scooped up and put in the laundry with his favorite shirts. Yeah, and if you hate somebody, put steel wool in with their laundry because these little tiny hairs that you can only see with an iPhone and tweezers, tiny little fibers in all of his favorite shirts that he washes himself separately. So that incident just sealed the deal. So I don't do any laundry. And yet I spent hours pulling out little steel wool fibers from his shirts for about 6 months. So anyway, he does yard stuff, most of the yard stuff. I do the fixing in the house. If shelves need to be put up or so that's Did I cover most of them?
Yeah. It seems like you know how to leverage each other's talents, make it work.
Yeah.
What about finances? How are the finances handled in your relationship?
My husband does all of the, he manages in terms of paying the bills, tracking account amounts. And then he does the savings part where it has to do with, we both kind of figured out what to do with the savings part, investments and whatnot. And then I handle all of this siphoning money off into different holding tanks, saving for college and car repairs and big trips. So I'm very concrete. So he would keep it all together, but I can't keep track that way. So I kind of have my own little saving system over here that I save for all of us in the way that makes sense to me. And then he handles the rest of it, like the 401k stuff and the bigger stuff. So he tracks the mechanics of it. I just track one little part of it because money makes my eyes cross.
What was the biggest misunderstanding you woke up from in your relationship?
I think on my part, I don't know what he would say here, but I think between the two of us, I think the biggest misunderstanding came from my part of things where we would have conversations about something and he looked just like he didn't care, partly because we're both this way. Neither of us really like having talks, like serious talks. If I could go a whole lifetime without it, I would. And he's the same way. So, but ironically, when there was something, so if I come, and I would have to tell him this, look, if I come to talk to you, it means we really definitely have to, or I wouldn't be doing it, because I'll do anything to avoid to having a serious discussion in life. But when I do, the first thing he'll do as soon as we start talking is he'll get up and go, get something from the kitchen, or he'd bring dishes in, or he just would get up, or he'd walk around. Oh, I got to do this. And he just couldn't, he would continue the conversation, but he would get up within 30 seconds. And then when we talk, he kind of would deflect, or I couldn't get anything from him. And what I realized was, which made me just want to kill him or hurt him badly. And because I would have this big thing and I need his help, and I would get, not only would I get nothing, but he would just, go off and do something trivial. So it looked like, I got no help on this thing. And I couldn't get any cooperation, and I needed his cooperation. So, but what I realized is that he just would get, when things would get, he would get over kind of maxed out in his mind. His mind works great when it's kind of light and diffuse, and there's not too much, he doesn't have anything on it. But as soon as there's something kind of more intense, it just would make him a little bit sort of destabilized and uneasy. And so his way of sort of diffusing that would be to walk around the way that I do when I'm sort of brainstorming. It would kind of keep my thoughts from gathering in any one place, and they'd kind of loiter otherwise. And if I walk around, somehow, I don't know, they sort of disperse. And so I realized that he could feel that there was something that he had required of him, and to get himself sort of ready and to handle it, he would kind of go out and I would go in. And because he wasn't coming in, I thought he wasn't taking things seriously. And I thought, well, now I have this person that I picked specifically because he was young at heart and fun and funny. And that's the version that I'm trying to work things out with. I have myself to blame, because he just looked like he just doesn't want to adult. He doesn't want to do any adulting. That's what it looked like to me. And because he wouldn't respond, it looked like he wasn't taking it in. But he would always, a few days later, he'd mention it, or I'd peck at him and he'd mention it. But there was always afterthoughts in there, and he'd go someplace with it. And sometimes we'd have to have more conversations, but I didn't realize anything was happening in there. And I didn't understand that he has to go out. That's his version of handling it, was to kind of disperse. And it looked to me like he was fleeing the scene. So I would kind of get frustrated. And then when I get frustrated, he would get a little bit more. He was just like a horse. He'd spook. He was very spooky. So it would be better. So I learned how to be lighter. I had to tell him, look, you got to stay in the room a little longer than that. But if you go, then come back. Don't go in and turn on the sink. You got to go in and draw. That's fine if you wander around, but don't go and make a noise. But I had to learn, I have to be much softer, and I need to be much more approachable in the way I talk. I can't be pointy. My feeling has to be easy to listen to. And then I could squeeze any message through the hole. But if I was pointy or impatient or intense at all, I couldn't squeeze anything through there. So I had to just float it, and then be willing for him to walk around and leave it. And then he'd always come around. So it took me probably 15 years to learn that. He would kind of, and so I kind of, it was a relief when I figured that one out.
It's definitely the long game, right?
Yes, it is the long game. And he would have gotten a very bad score if you could leave reviews. If he ended up back in like the dating circuit on an app, he would have been the kind of person you'd run from the review I was going to give him when it comes to handling things. But I also realized, I have to be accountable for the way I talk. It's on me as a talker. I didn't feel any accountability. I thought, well, I'm just saying the problem. And if it's a problem, of course it's going to come out upset. And I realized, that's reckless of me. I'm stepping on the relationship, and I have to be user friendly in the way I talk. It's not on him to be a good listener. I have to, at least I have to start with being a better talker. And then I feel like, that's because I want that from people. And I didn't realize, I thought I was entitled to talk however I wanted. If it was a big deal and he was wrong, I thought they thought I was kind of that, and that was on me.
What's one of the favorite things your husband does for you?
One of my favorite things, his presence is so easy that I can kind of just draft on his presence. The way that he is, in between his sort of moments of, his shortcomings and his weaknesses and his upsets, as he has moods too, like the rest of us. But, when he's not in a mood, the rest of the time, just his normal state of being is just, it's like he's like on an inner tube floating a river, but not the like rapids kind. Like that's what it feels like. And I feel like, I don't know, I kind of feel like sometimes I'm the person that's on the side of the river, like with flip-flops trying to like walk over these rocks. Like that's what it feels like sometimes, just in the, I don't know, the everyday mechanics. And then there's this guy just on a tube going the same pace, if not faster, and not having to do anything but maybe the occasional like splash this way or that way to redirect. And I feel like, it's really easy for me to just, he's in touch with the same life and the same reality and the same things, we're up against the same things. And yet he just seems to have a way of sort of hanging back and responding to things and being in life, just in the moment to moment. His way of being is just a much easier way. And if I didn't see it for myself, I don't know if I would think that was possible. And I think I've learned to hang back. I think I was a fairly easygoing person in a lot of ways to begin with, and not super excitable in terms of getting really upset and worked up. But he leans back a lot sooner than I do. And it's generally, that's his come from, whereas I have to find my way back there, because I'll get either amped up about things and, kind of excitable, and my mind will move too fast for me to track, or I'll get kind of irritable. He just is sort of, I don't know, he's like a Clydesdale. Those big draft horses are sort of just steady. And I feel like he's like clomping along, and I feel like I get a little, I'm zipping around, and I really don't need to be.
That's awesome.
That's my favorite feature.
Well, what is the least favorite thing your partner does?
The least favorite thing. I have several finalists, but I know I have to just pick one. I think my least favorite thing is that he will kind of get on board and collude with me in certain ways that I know is not good for me. Having a partner is so nice sometimes, because they don't react to things. There's so many things they don't react to the same way you do. They kind of rub off on you, or they check you a little bit. He will be easygoing about something. I'll get a burr in my saddle about it, and then he'll get influenced by me. And I let him, because I want somebody in my corner. but then we're both in my corner. And then I have to shut him up because I always come around, you know, I'll get mad at things, frustrated at a person or a thing, but I steer right into it. I think it's because I work with teenagers for 20 years every day. I just go right into it. I mean, I don't, you know, I keep it to myself. I don't go out in public with it, but I really I'll just be willing to just be scathing in my mind about something, but then it's out of my system the next day. Well, he's on that page. Now he lives on that page about that thing. And then he'll pull me back into it. And I have to tell him, no, stop that. This is my thing. And you know, you can't do that. And he's, you know, in a way, I love that he's not influenced by me in certain ways because, you know, he'll be slow and steady. But when he does get influenced by me, you know, he kind of, in a way, he trusts me a little too much, and I'm much more thoughtful. I'm much more, I can read a situation really fast, and he didn't see it because he's not, you know, hyper focused on things. He doesn't take things personally, or he doesn't make a big deal out of something, see ill intent in something. But once I see it, he'll say, oh, you're right, I didn't catch that. And then I have to neutralize him because I'll be over my bad attitude the next day and he's still in that camp. So in a sense, he's kind of listens to me a little bit too much and is a little too loyal to my cause. He lets me contaminate the waters, and then I live in contaminated waters the next day. And it's really hard to get him out of that.
So you may not have any, but do you have any relationship deal breakers, and why?
They've all reared their ugly heads if there were. No, I don't think so. I think that if there was going to be a relationship deal breaker, it would have been that I was more, and I think he would agree with this too. I've been just sort of relentless in handling whatever parenting challenges and not having a bad attitude. And I don't tolerate a bad attitude about our kids and about the enormous and sometimes very seemingly unfair amount of effort you put in, and you don't get that back. And it's, there's some way in which you can kind of get traumatized by certain parts of parenting that are hard, and you don't know how they're going to go. And you're kind of, you can kind of get either disheartened or feel a little bit jaded, or, sort of concern, have sort of a level of concern, or I don't know, almost like feeling like you don't know if it's going to work out or not, and sort of having lost faith in life a little bit because you don't really know what just happened. You can get a little traumatized by it, and that can color your, at times that's sort of colored my experience of the whole thing. Whereas I feel like other areas of life, when things go badly with like a job or something else, or a relationship, you sort of feel like, well, you live and learn, or we just weren't, the timing was bad. But somehow I feel like people can kind of not recover from parenting in a certain way and feel like they let their kid down, or they made mistakes and they can't get past it. And I just don't tolerate that, because, I don't like it, and I don't tolerate it. And so I'll get sort of, there would be times when we were at odds the most in our parenting is when I felt like, look, we can't afford to do that. If you're going to do that, then you're going to have to go outside or something, like get that out of here. I'm not going to handle the problems, because I was just involved in the mechanics more. And, and I felt like, look, I can't afford to have that around, because I'm not going to take things on and do it and have to put up with the noise over here. And I can't have any of that rub off on me, because I just got my shit together about that. So if there was going to be a deal breaker, I think we both would say that would have been it. When the parenting got rough is when we would kind of, we would if there was going to be a divide, it would have been there. Kind of I'd rather go it alone than I can't afford it.
How do you keep physical intimacy alive in your relationship?
These are good questions. I feel like this is, in a way, I found that it works kind of the same way that that my fondness for his good features won out over the things about him that drive me crazy. And I think if he's still with me, then he probably would say the same thing. Personality wise, after 25 years or however long it's been, you either get really good at overlooking things in them, or you can't stand them, or you've left them. So I think, we both gotten good at that in our own way. And I think that the intimacy part of it, I'm only interested in what attracts me to him. I'm just not really interested in what I'm not attracted to, in the same way that I'm not interested in what's attractive about other people. I'm not interested in it. So not that I don't have moments, and I know he does too, everybody does, where you'll see somebody else that's attractive. Then if they're not, on TV, they're actually in your life, you kind of know, like, I like that person's attractive to me. and it's just a very distinct, I'm not interested in it any more than if that person showed an interest in me, I would be even less interested. So I sort of, I don't know, in a way, I think maybe because I'm super impulsive. I've always sort of, as a teenager, I was very sort of adventurous, and I would try anything. I was just a very edgy group of friends. And I think because I'm impulsive, I know there's certain things that I have to sort of be mindful about. So I just won't let anything in if it has a chance of carrying me someplace. In the same way that I know if I'm going to exercise, if I don't do it in the 2-minute period right after I think to exercise, I'm not exercising. Not because I'm disciplined, because I'm completely undisciplined. And I have a 2-minute window. And if I miss it, I'm not exercising. So I know that about me. And I think I know that about people. And I know that because of biology, there's certain things you just don't let in the same way that I know if I let myself have a bad attitude about one of my kids, I know where that would go. I just don't let it.
That's great. Last question, Erika. Thank you for being so generous with us with your time.
Yeah, no, these are great.
If you could only say one thing to your partner, what would you want to say?
I think if I was going to say one thing to him, I think it would just be to thank him for sticking with me. Because I feel like, there's nowhere to hide in a relationship. That there's just, if it's a meaningful relationship and you stick together, you can't hide your, how you get, no matter how good you are at restraining or overlooking, you can't hide it. And I constantly feel like he's so forgiving and overlooking that I kind of feel like he can't possibly see straight. Like he can't be catching all of this. And I really feel like I feel so fortunate that I found somebody that not only brings so much to the table, but that's so willing to let me off the hook for all the things that, that sticks with me, even though I feel like sometimes, I don't know if I would stick with me. I don't know if, I think by 49, you kind of see there's things I hate certain things that I've done or said or handled things. And they, they're exposed to all of these, your worst traits. And I think it just would be that I'm so grateful that he's not only stuck with me, but he seems to be into it. I'm like, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of I'm kind of like surprised in a way sometimes.
Oh, that's beautiful, Erika. So touching.
He sounds like a keeper.
He is. Well, yeah. Like the question is, am I a keeper? So far, I think yes, he is a keeper. He's a great guy, and I can't believe that I don't know, landed him. I really feel like I'm I feel so happy.
Well, thank you for everything, Erika, for the wisdom that you shared at the beginning, for the fresh insights that you're having, for answering our questions at the end. It's just been such a delightful conversation.
Yeah, thank you for letting me be a part of it. I love what you're doing. I always love the things you guys do. All your projects are so good. But I love that this is like such an interesting twist of these questions, and it's so ad lib and things I've never thought about. It's kind of cool to have to come up with something from the heart that I've never formulated a thought about, really a coherent thought, let alone said it in a way that you guys don't have to edit. So that's anyway, thank you so much for inviting me and for having me back. It's been really nice.
It's been so lovely, and it's been so rich in content. But I always learn so much from hearing you talk. So thank you. It's been a real blessing for us to have you on this.
Yeah, I hope it's helpful to your audience.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. It's been helpful to us, so I'm sure it'll be helpful to them.
Good.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we'll include your information so people can reach out to you if they want to contact you. Thank you so much for listening to Rewilding Love. If you enjoyed this podcast, please let us know by subscribing on iTunes, and we would love for you to leave a review there.
iTunes reviews will steer people to this podcast who need help with their relationships.
If you would like to learn more about our work and our online rewilding community, please visit our website, therewilders.org.
Thanks for listening. Join us next week.